Story 1. Back when I was a kid, my friend Justin and I would frequent this rather large entertainment center for kids. I honestly can't remember the name exactly. It was like Fun Zone or Fun World Galaxy or something like that. Anyway, my mom would take me and Justin there every few weekends during the summer, and I have so many happy memories from that place. Maybe that's why this one bad experience stands out so much, though to be fair, it was terrifying. One Saturday afternoon, Justin and I arrived with my mom, and after checking in and getting tokens at the front desk, we ran to the arcade area, which is what we always did. We never got really big prizes, and honestly, we mostly just enjoyed running around, hitting buttons, and shooting things. While we were there, my mom would usually take a seat at one of the benches between this area and the dining hall area, which is where she was now. I'm not sure if she saw this, but after about 10 minutes, Justin and I heard a kid start screaming. This was over the sound of a loud Jurassic Park shooter game, I might add. We looked to see what was happening. There was a boy who looked to be around 12, kicking and screaming next to one of the skee-ball machines. Apparently he didn't do as well as he liked, so he was throwing a fit. I'm not sure if it was over tickets or not, though that probably doesn't matter. A few seconds later, he actually picked up one of the balls and was about to throw it, until an older woman, who I assume was his mom, grabbed his arm forcefully. She started screaming back at him as a crowd of people started to gather around them. I'm not sure if it was Justin or me who started laughing first, and I don't think we laughed too loud, but that kid saw us. While his mom still had him by the arm, he turned to face us and kept screaming. Then with his other arm, he picked up another ball and tried to throw it at us. Luckily, his mom stopped him again. I actually ducked, and neither of us thought it was funny anymore. Honestly, I'm not sure why we started laughing in the first place, but I'm sure it had to do with the fact that we were both 9 or 10 at the time. With the kid still yelling obscenities at us, a few employees came over while his mom continued to restrain him. She even seemed to snap at one of the employees to back off when he came in closer. This is where my mom had walked over and took me and Justin by the hand and started leading us away. A few seconds later, and we heard the kid quieted down. He might have been crying, but I don't know. I think my mom debated about whether or not we should leave, but Justin and I begged her to stay, and told her that that kid was probably going to leave now. I'm not sure if my mom realized that the kid had started screaming at us specifically, but I doubt it, since my mom was very protective, and I think she would have definitely had us leave if she'd known. Anyway, we didn't go back to the arcade, opting for another attraction instead. Like I said, this place was huge. I think there was a laser tag area, a rock climbing wall, a bowling alley, and maybe even something outside. I can't remember exactly where we went, but 30 minutes later we came back to the dining area and ordered a pizza and drinks. The dining area had about 15 of those long rectangular lunchroom type tables, and in the front was an animatronic band, like Five Nights at Freddy's. We weren't actually creeped out by it, and now just thought it was kind of funny. There was also a huge playscape, which was adjacent to part of the dining area. It had like 4 or 5 levels, with multiple entrances and slides, as well as a ball pit somewhere within it. After we finished eating, Justin and I ran into it. We usually chase each other around and go down the slides, though my mom warned us to be careful for the little kids. We were in there for about 10 minutes already, when Justin thought he heard something. A moment later I realized what it was. It was that kid again. I guess he didn't leave. Justin and I were both freaked out, given how violent he was and how he tried to come after us. We couldn't tell where in the playscape he was, but we looked at each other and automatically decided we needed to leave. We were on one of the upper levels, in one of the rooms that had punching bag things you could swing from. Justin and I immediately started looking for the slide. We quickly picked up the right path, but soon froze in our tracks as we saw the kid was in our way. And I don't mean he just happened to be there. No, he was looking right at us, and his expression said it all. Justin turned to run, and I followed too. The kid immediately ran towards us. We ran back the same way we came, trying to find one of the passageways back to the lower levels. I should mention that this kid was big, not necessarily buff, but rather overweight. Justin and I were both on the skinny side, and we didn't want to experience what it would be like to get body slammed by him, or worse. There also weren't a lot of other big kids around, or any kids for that matter, even though I'm not sure anyone would have helped us. We made it down that first passage and made our way through another area with foam tube things to get to another slide. That's when he caught us, or rather, me specifically. As we were almost to the other side of that room, I felt a hand with fingernails dig into my right calf. I screamed and instinctively kicked. That wasn't enough, because a second later I felt his other arm grab me. I could see in his eyes that Justin was terrified, but I knew he'd have my back. I kept kicking at the kid, but he was on top of me and his weight had me pinned down. Justin and I were both screaming at this point, undoubtedly getting the attention of the adults below us. But the kid wasn't fazed. He let go of my leg with one hand and landed a good punch on my side. The air left my lungs as I almost choked. Then I saw Justin grab the kid's neck and pull him back. I staggered back to my feet as I saw him pin Justin against the wall of this room, which, like every room, was made of this fabric mesh. I punched him square in the back, but it didn't seem to have much of an effect. Then he raised his hand to hit Justin's face, and I grabbed it. It didn't stop his punch, but did deflect it to the side. Just then I heard shouting, both from below and behind us, and the next thing I knew, an employee pinned the kid to the wall and forced his hands off Justin. What we felt afterwards is something I don't really want to describe, so I'll mention a few other details. The kid's mom hadn't been watching him. I don't know where she was. When the employees got her, she was furious with her son, but oh boy was my mom more furious. Under any other circumstances, she'd never get physical with anyone, but I knew she was trying extremely hard to keep her hands off this woman. When she wasn't yelling at her son, the woman was begging my mom not to press charges. She told her that her son had special needs and was in therapy or something. In that moment, my mom wasn't having any of it, and I don't really blame her. Ultimately, I don't think she pressed charges, but the police were actually called, and me, Justin, and a few others gave statements. It was also surreal. When my mom called Justin's mom, she was hysterical as well, and we left immediately to drop Justin off. I should also mention that everyone in both the dining and arcade areas had fallen silent and had been watching us, which added to how unreal it felt. Now, years later, Justin and I are still close, maybe because we bonded even more during that experience. But to this day, I hate the fear I felt and how I considered just leaving Justin there, especially when he saved me from more bodily harm and possibly my life. It might sound silly, but that experience changed me, and I hope ultimately for the better. I guess the moral of the story is that danger can lurk anywhere, even in places that seem safe, and even when you're a kid. I don't think I'll ever get over what that kid did to us that day, but part of me does hope he's getting help if he needs it. Story 2. This story took place one Thursday evening, when me and my best friend Ashley visited what you might call a kids' entertainment business. I guess it was kind of like a Chuck E. Cheese, but instead of animatronics, there were those bouncy castles. The place also wasn't that big, but it was loaded up with games, which of course gave tickets you could take to the prize counter. Ashley and I were both 13 at the time, and we were with Ashley's dad. We didn't have school because of parent-teacher conferences, and Ashley and I had already attended them. I won't go into a lot of personal stuff, but Ashley and her dad were pretty close. I think her mom had some kind of condition and didn't get out much, so Ashley and her dad did a lot of stuff together. He promised to take her to this place if she got good grades, and Ashley being Ashley, that was really the only thing that could happen. It was also a given that I'd be accompanying them, since we basically did everything together. Anyway, we usually hit several of the arcade games first, which was exactly what we did this time. Ashley's dad gave us both $10 worth of tokens, and told us to make it last. This particular time, I remember we made out pretty good, but wanted to keep our tickets for now and pick out a prize later so we could think about it. We also got some of the food they had there. Now, if we'd seen anyone we knew, we'd be extremely self-conscious, but since we didn't, we also crawled inside some of the bouncy castles. They were obviously meant for the littler kids, but I think even as adults, more people enjoy them than are willing to admit. Anyway, there were like 5 of them, including one that had 2 big slides leading to the outside. They were themed after kid stuff, such as Toy Story, My Little Pony, etc. Ashley and I were just laughing, bouncing and pushing each other, when Ashley let out a short scream. And one of the corners was a guy just sitting there. I'm not sure whether guy is the right word to use, though I'll go ahead and use it. He looked to be about 15 or 16, and he had his arms around his knees in front of him. Because there weren't overhead lights in the castles, some of them were kinda dim inside, including this one. That dude must have just been sitting there, and we hadn't noticed him until now. We stopped bouncing, a bit self-conscious but also taken aback. He looked kind of grody. He was wearing one of those Hawaiian shirt things over a black t-shirt and baggy jeans, and his hair looked messy, and he had a bit of a beard and mustache going. Ashley looked at me, apparently wondering if I was going to say anything, and I just looked back at her. Ashley said hi, but he didn't seem to respond. We just stood there, not knowing what to do. A moment later, the guy looked up but didn't say anything. I elbowed Ashley, indicating we should go, and we started walking back over to the entrance. But just as we got there, the guy said, "Hey," rather loudly. We stopped and looked at him. Still without moving, he said, "Want to see something?" Of course we were creeped out at this point, and I wanted to leave, but Ashley said something like, "Yeah." Without getting up, the dude pulled something out of his pocket. Maybe Ashley realized before I did that it was a pocket knife. We froze, ice running through our veins. The guy opened the knife and held it down to the floor of the castle, indicating that he would cut it. We still didn't move. The guy just held the knife there for a while, then appeared to close it and put it back in his pocket. Eventually, Ashley and I found it within ourselves to get out. I debated about whether or not to tell someone, but it didn't matter though, since I knew Ashley would tell her dad. But as we'd find out momentarily, Ashley's dad was in the bathroom. After a few minutes he came out, and Ashley whispered what we just saw. Immediately he got protective and walked over to confront the guy. When he got to the entrance of the castle, Ashley's dad said, "This it?" then turned and forcefully opened the netting that came down over the entrance. But the guy wasn't in there. Ashley's dad walked back over to us and put his arm around Ashley, then led us to the counter where he told the employee working there about the guy. The employee must have radioed the mall cops, because one of them came over, along with an actual cop. It wasn't actually unusual for our mall to have a cop in it, since I think one of the anchor stores requested he be there to deter people from shoplifting. Either way, they told parents and their children to remain calm, some of whom were freaking out, while they did a thorough search of the place. It wasn't actually that big, maybe the size of a basketball court overall. I assumed they checked the bathrooms and areas the guy could be hiding, like under the bouncy castles. They didn't find him, and the cop and the mall cop discussed with the manager about whether or not to close the place down. No one remembered seeing the guy leave, but a lot of the teenagers working there would be on their phones. And since the guy didn't appear to be in the venue any longer, the only logical possibility was that he had left. The manager decided to keep the place open, though most of the customers ended up leaving. After what happened, Ashley's dad required us to leave too, though Ashley and I wouldn't have wanted to stay anyway. However, I did really need to use the restroom, and in hindsight it made no sense whatsoever for me to use the one outside the entertainment area, since that one had just been checked. Anyway, I decided to use the one right by the mall entrance where we came in. Ashley and I went in together while her dad stayed right outside. I'll skip details here, but when we were in the stalls, we heard another stall open. We hadn't realized someone else was in here, and I felt my heart beat faster. I honestly didn't expect it to be that guy, but somehow, in some way, I knew it was him. Maybe it was just the way he opened the door, I really can't explain it. While contemplating whether or not to scream, that decision was made for me when I saw the guy peering at me through the crack in the stall door. Ashley's dad came rushing in, but somehow the guy managed to slip past him. Her dad told us that he was hiding behind the wall between the stall and the sink areas, so that when he ran right up to my stall, the guy darted past him. Now Ashley's dad is in pretty good shape, so this guy had to be pretty quick. Long story short, Ashley's dad marched us over to the mall office and gave the employees there a piece of his mind. Honestly though, there wasn't anything they could do. The guy had run clear through the entrance and wasn't seen by anyone after that. Ashley and I didn't go back to the mall for months, on the off chance that guy would be there. But when we did go back, we never saw him. There were so many unanswered questions. Was he stalking me or Ashley before we met him in the bouncy castle? Why did he joke about cutting it with a knife? Was that supposed to impress us? And of course, did he follow us to the restroom, or was he just hoping to see any other girls in there? I know I'll never know, and that makes it stand out as the most terrifying, but also the strangest experience in my life so far. At the end of the day, I'm just glad we were all okay. Story 3. I worked in a family entertainment center for a few months in college, before moving on to another, better paying job. To be fair, it was really well run, and our managers were reasonable people. Definitely can't say that for all the other jobs I've had. Think of this place like a Chuck E. Cheese, but maybe a tiny bit smaller. The arcade area was cramped at places, but we still had all the amenities such as a playscape, dining area, ticket counter, and of course the animatronics. I can't remember what the specific name of the animatronics set we had was, but unlike Five Nights at Freddy's, it wasn't really scary. But perhaps that just makes the experience I had that more bizarre and terrifying. When this happened, I was working the latest shift, which included cleaning things up and closing down for the night. Usually it'd be me and one other employee. On this particular night, that employee was Brenda, a middle-aged woman who was also a shift manager. Anyway, near the end of our shift, she received a phone call and then abruptly told me she had to leave. I think it had something to do with one of her high school-aged kids needing a ride somewhere, but I'm not sure. She told me to finish vacuuming the floors and make sure the dining area was clean, so that's what I did. Brenda left, and I was alone, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little uneasy. There's just something about being in a deserted place that always had a lot of noise and energy during the day. It was most definitely a liminal space. Remember what I said about Five Nights at Freddy's just now? Well, to my horror, I started to hear sounds. It wasn't from the animatronics though, which was the first place I checked, but rather from our playscape. I couldn't tell what it was. The lights were still on, so it's not like it was hard to see in the building, but there were a few slides and solid plastic tubes that I couldn't see into. I stopped and fell silent, trying my best to pick up on anything while also trying to convince myself that I had just been imagining things. Then I heard it again. It sounded like a hand or knee being pressed against one of the plastic tubes near the top of the playscape. For context, our playscape wasn't super massive, but it did have like 3 distinct levels to it. My blood ran cold, and I already knew I wasn't going up there. The question I had was, what else should I do? Do I yell out and confront whoever that was? Do I get out of the building and call the cops? I was like 95% sure that what I heard was a person and not an animal. That's when I saw an image that still haunts my nightmares to this day. Peeking out from the edge of one of the tubes, I saw a face, and it wasn't a kid's face. No, that face belonged to a 30 or 40-year-old man with long, greasy hair. That was it. I ran like there was no tomorrow to the front doors, which were the closest to where I was, but of course they were locked. My heart sank when I realized the keys for it were back in the employees-only section. As if the man realized this too, I heard him scamper to one of the slides and start coming down. I bolted back past the play area and through the double doors to the employees-only section. I ran to the desk we had there and found the keys. Next thing I knew, the double doors flew open, but luckily there was a back door close to where I was. I didn't actually see that man come in as I sprinted out the back door. I ran to where my car was, got inside, and locked it and sped away. This was around 10:30 and the shopping center we were in was deserted. I stopped 2 blocks away by a 24-hour diner and called the cops. I won't go over every detail, but I did go back to our store with the cops and the general manager met us there shortly thereafter. Surprisingly, nothing was stolen or seemed damaged. The security camera footage did show the man running out of the playscape and into the employees-only section. But he waited for about 30 seconds after I left before leaving through the same back door. He then took off into the retention pond area and left the camera's field of view. But maybe the strangest part was how the man got into the playscape in the first place. He must have done so when there were a lot of people around, i.e. when we were still open. Our theory is that he told the kids that saw him that he was just somebody's dad, who was going to check on his son or daughter. The police actually tried to get in touch with some of the patrons who had visited us that day, but I'm not sure that investigation went anywhere. After this happened, I was freaked out for a while, and thankfully my bosses let me avoid having to do the late shift. The store also changed the locks and beefed up security a bit, but I left a few weeks later and don't know what happened after that. Ultimately, it just goes to show that there can be weirdos and creeps anywhere, and just what that man's intentions were, I'll never know.